Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for making time today to come out this afternoon. And really, my goal for this course this afternoon is to do a couple things. One is, the workshop title itself is about speedlights and lighting, high action sports, and portraiture. What I want to do for you guys really is to show you my entire workflow of working with speedlights. If you guys have ever worked with them before, sometimes they work great, the ETTL modes, but how do you step beyond a basic snapshot? How do you start creating something that's art that looks very different from a snapshot? So I want to share my workflow with that, and a lot of that is also framing, composition, and really importantly is you as a photographer, as a director, working with a model, with talent, and that's a big deal. And it's one of the hardest things. It was definitely one of the harder, leaps for me as I worked up from an amateur photographer up to, budding pro and through the ranks that way. It's really the connection that you can have with your talent. So I want to share all that with you guys, and then also just to share the new, the 600EX Speedlights, the radio transmitter capabilities, how we can get them off the camera itself and create some really dynamic lights. So essentially what we'll do is we'll start with the most basic setup, one flash on the camera. What can we do with that if you've got one flash? What can you do with one flash if you've got a transmitter but you only have one flash, whether for budget or just because you're working fast, you're covering an event, you don't have time to do a lot of setups. And then let's build up 2, 3, 4 speedlights. No guarantee that the 4 speedlight shot is going to look any better than the 1 speedlight one, but we'll at least show you how to do it. And my realm of operating really as an outdoor photographer is how do we do the most with the least? I've grown up as a climber first, long before I got into photography, and then photography for me became a way of capturing some of the great places where I was climbing and mountaineering. And I've always held to the adage that if you bring too much gear, you won't make the summit. And so it's the same thing in speedlights. More lights does not necessarily make a better portrait or a better sports shot. If you look at all the iconic shots a lot of times, the photos that have stood the test of time, a lot of those, the photographers, 9 out of 10 of them would say, look, I want to work with the least amount of light. I want to spend the time connecting with my subject, not moving around light stands and such. So that's just a brief intro here. And I'll speak for just about 10 minutes and show you a little bit of the work that I did last year outside in Aspen and Snowmass, probably about the first week that we got the 600 Speedlights and how we use them. So I live in the Aspen area in western Colorado. I'm a freelance photographer and director, and I generally love to use the lightest setups that I can. For the main reason is not just that it weighs less in the backpack, but the big reason is you spend more time being creative. The more that you can free yourself from all the tetherings of gear, from carrying stuff. I say a lot, when you're out and you're on a long shoot day, you feel like you're working no matter what you're doing. If you're setting up lights, moving stuff around, positioning your model, but you're really not creating anything until you're ripping frames and being creative. And that's where you want to cut down as much of your setup time and really make your camera and your gear an extension of your hand. And more importantly, you want to make that camera an extension of your heart and of your vision and your connection to your subject. Because without that, you're just going through the paces and you're not creating any kind of magic. So that's where hopefully today, teaching you these speedlights, we can get you through some of that, through those levels. You do need to learn the language of working with the speedlights, and then it can become second nature to you. So we'll take some questions, limited as we go along. If there's anything that I've forgotten or I'm glossing over as we talk, holler out. And I also would love to know, you guys say, hey, I've worked in this one light situation and I've had this issue or that. Bring it up as we're going through the shoot, because this is for you guys to to bring your questions and your workflow, so I can help you today with that. So to start, just a quick intro. I wanted to share when I first got these Speedlights, it was about a year and a half ago, and they were paired really with the 5D Mark III and the 1DX, and they really, for me, were a revolution in the sense that the previous generation of Speedlights, the 580s, they worked more on with the infrared signal, I think, Eric, and they weren't a radio transmitter mode. So now you can do wireless. You can take them up to over 100 feet away. You can hide them behind anyone or behind objects. That's great if you're shooting a wedding. You want to light up the back of a bridal dress and such. Hide that speedlight behind there. Now it works on a radio transmitter mode. You can light up to 15 different speedlights. So we worked this with the mountaineer and the alpinist Steve House, and we created a short film called Shattered. And along with it, we also shot some stills and such. So we worked with the 1DX and with the 600 Speedlights. And this really is what we do here. We're working in Ouray, Colorado. And what I like to do, and we'll work with today, is if you're going to add a light, there are a couple reasons you can add a speedlight, right? The first question is, why do I even need one? Well, the reason here is that we're in the bottom of an ice, canyon. It's just gray light. Gray as gray gets. Even the ice looks gray because the whole thing's just in the shady north face. So the reason you add a speed light, in my opinion here, is to add some drama to the situation. What you're really trying to do in a lot of ways is add shadow as much as you add lighting. It's not just the light, blasting white light, that looks okay, but a lot of times what looks better is shadow, and you can see some gradations on this side of Steve's face. So how did I do that? What we do is speedlights allow us, or any type of light, it allows you to underexpose your background. So think about, okay, what's the drama that I want to create here? Steve's a masculine, athletic, world-class alpinist. So we'll take the ambient down a little bit. So this is why I like to shoot in aperture value mode, or manual mode. Aperture value mode, you roll the dial back and underexpose your shot by maybe your ambient by about 2 stops. Then you add the speed light and say, hey, okay, speed light, you can put it in ETTL or you can put it in manual. Now I want you to fire and expose Steve's face, at least this part of it, properly. So we hid a speed light, had an assistant behind the ice there, lighting him from behind, and that casts our glow and it also lights up the ice from behind. I find that type of backlit is very interesting. Now you can see we have a nice separation of several stops of latitude from the highlights here to the background. So similar thing for a portrait. It's really just a one light setup here coming across from the side, but the key to make it somewhat dramatic is underexposing the ambient shot by about 2 stops. So my go-to, if you're shooting any type of event, really, is underexpose your camera, let's say by about 2 stops, set your speed light to ETTL, maybe just normal mode. Run with that, give it a try. You could even put maybe a little warm gel on your strobe, and then your subject will stand out a little bit warmer from a cooler backdrop. And suddenly you've got something to play with, and it's suddenly very interesting. We didn't gel these shots, but you can see that he stands out a bit from the blue ice, just because the flash itself is about a 5,000 Kelvin, and then the shade of here where we're shooting is so much cooler that the flash stands out as warmer in comparison. And we'll work with a little bit of the color temperatures and some strobe and some filters here this afternoon, so you can start to see that color and how that brings depth to flash photography. One of the next things we did is I had the Canon Digital Learning Center folks there, Erica Silverstein and her crew there, which is a great resource, by the way, online. They have all sorts of tutorials, for all cameras, speed lights, lenses, and such. They gave us a fun assignment to go out and shoot with skiers and snowboarders at the Snowmass Terrain Park in Colorado. And one of the things they said was, hey, we want you guys to shoot some midday stuff as well as dusk. And my first reaction was, well, with these small speedlights, it's going to be tough to shoot midday. We're at 10,000 feet, in March, sun's high, it's blazing light. What can we do? And so what we did, and I'll show you a behind the scenes short piece on this, essentially is we would gang 3 or 4 speedlights together and put them in a Westcott octabank, a silver octabank, and fire them. And I found out that you can definitely overpower daylight, even at high altitude, real harsh light, if you're close enough to your subject. So if I'm quite close to hand, I could easily overpower hand with daylight with a speed light right about here. But we want the light to look nice and relatively, bright and soft on our talent here. So we had 1 octabank with 4 pump it into the first 3 talent in the background, and then another octabank firing on our talent in the background. So you can see the angle of the light. I like to learn to read light when I'm looking at magazines and blogs and figure out, where's that light coming from, what's it doing, and how is it adding. So you can see we have a little bit of shadow on this guy's face here and their nose. You can see where the sun is, obviously, in the shadow that's casting. So you can read this shot from behind, and I tell this to you guys because it's really helpful to break down other shots. Now you can see that our speed light's here. You can see the reflection in there, and then there's a light here. And how do you know? Because there's a shadow here, and this is lit up. This would have all been dark, if we didn't have a speed lights on there. So now you kind of know where the sun angle is. So we had 2 different lights, and you'll see some of this here. Now midday is not my prime choice of time to shoot in the blaring sun. If I was given my own choice, if it's midday, I said, hey, let's go under the shade of a pine tree or aspen trees. Let's go under the shade of a porch or do something. Let's wait for the light to get interesting, and then we can start. This is the sun's still an hour up or so, but there are a couple things that we're doing here that were really exciting for me. And this is in all honesty, the 580EX speedlights. They worked in ETTL mode, but not nearly as well as the 600s. And so I was figuring out, as these guys were snowboarding down the half pipe, and I'm lying right near the edge, they're coming up, jumping toward us, and landing here. And we're trying to shoot multiple takes. So they're moving quite rapidly, and their distance to us is changing very rapidly. We originally said, we're going to have to set these speedlights in manual mode because there's no way that these speedlights are going to be able to meter while someone's jumping through the air, clipping in and out of the sun, and changing their course to us. In automatic mode Speedlight's just simply not going to be able to do that kind of math, and it hadn't been able to before. And we were blown away that the 600s now are able to meter and give us a really great exposure every time that they're coming, even shooting, backlit into the sun that way. So, and I'm not making that up, or exaggerating that in any way. It was a real mind-opening experience for my assistants and I. We said, whoa, we don't need to go to manual mode all the time anymore. These, the way these interface with this 1DX and the 5D3 is just amazing. So, as we learned to read some of these shots, and again, the sun's still up. We haven't gotten to the, what I consider the best light of the day yet, but just a couple thoughts is, if you want to do this, let's call it kind of the new school, right, of outdoor, snowboarding photography and such. We'll get there to something more dramatic as the light comes down in the coming shots. But if you want to shoot when the sun's up, my thoughts, my suggestions for you guys are, think about balancing your highlights and your shadows in the shot. Now, I could underexpose this a little bit more, but look that we're starting to get pretty heavy in the darks there in those pine trees too. We're a little blown out around the clouds. I'm trying to bridge the gap there. It's a judgment call, as to what you want to hold, and we'll continue to look at that. But essentially, we'll put Speedlights then on our subject. I had an assistant holding Speedlight right up there. And I try to position, whenever possible, my subject, a lot of times, when we're doing this type of Speedlight photography, near the sun. Why? Because the viewer's eye, if you took the subject out of it, your viewer's eye is naturally going to go to that highlight that's in this, that's on the page somewhere. So if you position your subject there, you're kind of drawing them right to the, the center of where they should be looking. It doesn't mean you want them in the center of the image, but you get the idea of how that's drawing your viewer's eye. So you position your subject somewhere in that realm. Then you can have a nice dark. This one here, the sun's starting to get lower. We have a nice dark here. It's a foundation. For a commercial shot, you can run type or whatever. It's got the kind of the rule of thirds going here, where it's maybe 1/3 horizon, 2/3, call it negative space or storytelling space. And so these were all taken in ETTL mode. Here you can see a couple of Speedlights where they're on the right. Now, obviously, if we were, if this was a finished shot, we would very easily take those out. I would say don't worry too much in your own photography about, if you're handy at all in Lightroom or Photoshop, don't worry too much about getting your Speedlights out of the shot if you're one who doesn't mind retouching your shots, because it's very easy to retouch these or to take them out. Another thing you can do, another trick is, if you have your shots, your Speedlights on stands, and if your camera's on a tripod, you can take all the shots you want with all Speedlights, all sorts of, hullabaloo in your scene, strip the lights, then shoot a couple more frames of that same shot without that. So you have just a plated background. Now you have a very clean backdrop, whatever that is back there. And then you can do a very easy composite in Photoshop. Take out all your light stands, whatever else it is, around there, assistants, dogs, cats, can all go away. And then you've got a great looking shot. So a lot of times when we're struggling, obviously it's easiest to get your stuff out of the way, but a lot of times when we're struggling outdoors, we want to get the softest possible light onto our subjects. It's a group or whatever it is, and we want to get a big softbox up there. Great, we'll just say, hey, guys, let's just put it on a tripod, let's just plate it, then we can we get the sky, and then we bring in our softboxes in there. It's a very easy composite to get your lighting tools out of the way. So here's again what I did. Why did I set up here, right? Before the subject even came into the frame, can you guys see why I essentially positioned myself in relation to the sky and the sun where I did, right? I'm trying to do a couple things. I'm trying to build a little bit of that, rule of thirds, where our subject's in the upper left corner, and if you draw some grids across, 2 and 2, so you have the photo divided into thirds. Your subject can be kind of in this spot. I love to put subjects, here, 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 here. It's just kind of, they're compelling spaces. And then take a look. Here's the halo of the sky, right? Natural place to position your subject, because this is where the brightest shot is. If your subject was down here and he's lit, it would be kind of awkward, right? If you had this bright thing up here and then your subject's down here, the viewer's eye wouldn't know where to go right at first. So think about that as you're positioning your subjects, whether that's in the studio or in the outdoors. And that's why even in the studio, you'll see people will put a little strobe right in the backdrop, right? What's that for? A lot of times it's to help draw the viewer's eye, to this halo of light around them. And this, I did underexpose this by a couple stops. You can see how the background's, pretty dark. And again, even at sunset, even after the sun has set, there's still quite a bit of latitude and extra light in the back there. So there's a finite period of time, let's call it 20 minutes or so. That's this glory time when you can really get a beautiful, color in the sky, and it's not too much brightness, and you can position your subject in there. And that's the time I really love to shoot with strobes. And this I'm shooting with a 14mm lens. A lot of times when I'm shooting outdoors, I love to work with a wide angle lens. Sometimes I went to a 16-35. We looked at all these spots when we scouted and said, okay, well, what do we want here? They've got some very big jumps. This is the Aspen Valley Snow and Ski and Snowboard Club, free ride team here. These guys can jump off, huge, huge jumps, but that's not the point. If they go up too high in the air, you've got this little speck, and you don't have anything, in the ground. So I actually said, I want a small jump, and it's just a really small jump, and I want them to be, pretty much not that much taller than my head, so that I can position them and connect them to the ground. So, think about that as well as you're positioning your subject. That way, I can tie subject, background story, and environment, and it's really important to keep those both. So this is this, and you can see the Speedlites here lighting up from beneath. We had some there, and then also some coming from the right side as well. And so one thing that we figured out when we got these Speedlites, and I hadn't tried this before, was can this we had just gotten the 1DX, and I'll show you the sequence here. I thought, well, okay, the 1DX shoots 12 frames a second, right? Can we keep up with Speedlites? Can Speedlites fire at 12 frames a second and keep up with our athletes as they're running, jumping, whatever, skiing? Turns out, so we just did some tests in the studio and found out that if you set your Speedlites to either 1/32nd power or 1/64th power, somewhere right in that realm, juice them up with new batteries, they'll fire at 12 frames a second, and you'll get good exposure for all of those. So that's a pretty amazing thing. I'll show that in the video as that happens here. But we actually got 13 takes out of this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And then we composited that in Photoshop in Lightroom into one take that way. And actually for this, we didn't actually take a master plate of it. This was all handheld. And the Photoshop really just gives you a lot of freedom these days to take all this and then to composite it all later. So that's another thing, just a small, somewhat off tangent, but definitely on tangent thought that I have here is if you're shooting athletes or anything in the outdoors, you can shoot your subjects. Let's just say I wanted to capture an action, right here is the motion. You can then feel free to just plate the rest of your scene. Just take lots of different shots if you want to have a panoramic shot, with your athlete in it. And then you just bring that into Lightroom, into Photoshop, and you can create a panorama from those other shots. So a lot of times it can be hard if you want to use just the right lens to shoot a subject. Subject models don't look all that good if you shoot them with a 16mm lens. It's not a flattering portrait lens. Well, you don't necessarily need to do that. You can shoot with a longer lens and then shoot plates of the rest of your scene and composite that later, and you'll get a more flattering shot with your subject. So just something to think about. We're here at the Snowmass Half Pipe at sunset.
Okay, we got some athletes here. They're ready to go whenever you guys are ready.
I'm leaving Draper's main key light on ETTL because it's doing a great job firing right into the setting sun. What Draper's going to be doing is filling probably at a front 45-degree angle from the right of the camera onto the athlete's face and body. I've set Corey's backlight to be +1 in ETTL mode, so we have a little bit of a stronger backlight. I'm using a 14mm lens. That allows me to get right low to the lip. We have Draper's flash at 105mm, and we set Corey's to 105 too. That gives us a little leeway as the athletes are moving so fast, so we don't have to have such a tight range of focus with the lights. Might move away from that one a little bit. Oh, it's awesome. Great shot. Nice tension in it. Nice. That's great. Here my camera is set to manual mode so I can underexpose the background. And the Speedlites are in ETTL mode to perfectly expose the athlete. Whew. That's great. Awesome. Here we had a really great shoot on the half pipe today, and now we're shooting at a box and a little rail slide here. And what we're doing here is we're really side lighting the skiers at a 45-degree angle with the sun over the hills is casting a lot of reflection in the sky. So I'm putting the skiers as they're on the box in the halo created by the clouds there, and then having side lights. So we've got a little rib of shadow in the foreground. I'm in manual mode. I'm to 2/50th of a second at f7.1 at ISO 100. And then I've set my Speedlite groups to just pure TTL. We're using the 3 Speedlites on the IDC triple threat system here, just the little spider holders. And Draper has 3 Speedlites in Group A. Corey has 3 Speedlites in Group B. And I can really, manipulate those as I need to on this STE3 transmitter and say, hey, just bump it up to get the best look. So far, I've been really happy with what we're getting in TTL mode, just straight through. Our final setup here after sunset is at a small kicker jump. This is really my favorite time of day to shoot because the strobes can create such a dramatic look against the dusk sky. My A and my B, those are just at ETTL, and they just know to illuminate the skier in the air at the right exposure. They're doing a great job. I haven't touched them, and you'll see we're getting a lot of great stuff. This is an exciting setup in that we're working with the 1DX, and so I'm going to be shooting 12 frames a second, and our strobes are going to be able to keep up with that. As we get less light in the sky, it's much easier for the strobes to keep up. I'm always surprised that in 12 frames, there's one decisive frame that's always the best. So it's a big deal to be able to shoot at 12 frames a second rather than having to try to guess. I can let it rip. Drop in, okay. In post-production, we can look at the computer and say, that's the perfect frame right there. We've had a great spring day here shooting on Snowmass Mountain. I hope this has been helpful for you guys to see a little bit of how the lighting setups work and maybe inspiring for your own photography as well. Happy shooting. Oh, I said at the beginning of the workshop I have to buy all my own gear. I borrowed all 9 Speedlites for that. I did not buy 9 Speedlites for that shoot. All right, let's move into to Lightroom here. Okay, so let's move into the live portion of our shoot, which will be fun. And what I want to do is really to show you from the ground up how, flash photography works. What I really don't like when I go to, what it is, photo trade shows or workshops, everything's all set up and dialed and someone's rattling away and saying, hey, look how good we can do this stuff. Who knows how long they spent setting this stuff up, what are their settings, how does it work? And in your own photography, you try to replicate it and something doesn't work or it's all a little funky here and there. This happens to me all the time. We're dealing with electronics, with technology and such. So I want to make this very transparent of how we build from the ground up, in our workshop for photos and strobes. So the first question is, so if I'm working with Hannah, the question is, what type of shots do I want to get with her today? So Hannah's a great competitive cyclist here in the city. We've worked together before, and it's been really nice, to work with her. The question is, if we want to, that's the main question you should ask yourself as you're going out on an assignment, whether it's a self-assignment or one that, an editor is giving to you, is what type of image do we want to get? How do we want to show our subject? And you really create that with how you sculpt the light and, most importantly, the shadow. So first thing is, why do you even want to use a flash, or why do you want to take the flash, on the camera or off the camera? So let's walk through that just very, very briefly. So I'll tether in here, and hopefully this should bring it into Lightroom. So I could get a shot. Yeah, your helmet can be on. Sure, we're fine. We won't work with the. We don't need the sunglasses yet. Yeah. So let's just say, really what I want to do, and my goal, as a photographer, is 2 things, right? I'm freelance commercial photographer, so pretty much get paid to have people, my shots have to attract someone's attention, look different, stop people when they're flipping through a magazine or whatever it is on the side of a bus or something like that. So my goal, and that's also the same, if I'm shooting, pro bono nonprofit documentaries too, it's the same thing. The point is, it's not just to make people stop, but it's to create an emotion, to cultivate an emotion. And so you are the holder of that, and it's important, I think, at times, to start with a plan of what you want to do and the emotions you want to create. Doesn't mean you have to stick to that plan. You rarely do, but at least you've given it some thought, and you have at least a plan A, so that you're warmed up with your model and you don't look like you don't know what you're doing at all. But for this purpose, let's start right with Hannah and say, okay, why do we even need to add a flash to this situation? Let's just say I go to aperture value mode in my camera. I can just dial I'll be at f2.0. I can take the ISO up. I shoot commonly at 3200 for commercial shoots. It's just fine. Do we even need a flash at all? So here's a shot of Hannah, and I'll just set white balance. Oh, right now it's at 5500, but we could just go to, we'll leave it at that and see what happens. So here's a shot. Probably a little underexposed in here, but let's see what happens as it comes in. Come on in. Okay. Move that around there a little bit there. Okay, so this is just lit by this one light panel coming from the side here. You know, it's not a terrible shot in that sense. We'll get rid of that there. But can we do better? You know, very likely, right? It's not like this is going to be an award-winning shot at all. So the next question is, let's add a strobe. Does this make it any better? You know, why would we want to add a strobe? Well, let's just say I wanted to see more of her face. Her eyes are lit up. We want to get to know her better. So we have a couple options here. I will set my camera to aperture value mode, f2.0. And I will then, let's see, I'll make sure my flash, I'm going to set the sync on my flash to high-speed sync. It's just a one button here. That way it allows me to shoot over 1/250th of a second. There's really no downside that I can think of or why you don't want to have high-speed sync set on your camera. It just allows you to shoot more freely beyond the 1/250th of a second shutter speed here. So Eric Stoner is here with Canon as well. He and I talked about this before, and he's a great resource. I forgot to introduce him here. So after the class as well, he's really a real mastermind of a lot, you know, of all the technicalities of the speedlights, flashes, the lenses, and the cameras. Feel free to reach out to him or me after. Okay, so we're going to add a strobe. What I can do is take my ISO down a little bit. I don't need to be at 3200 if I'm trying to capture ambient light. You know, let's go back to a more normal zone of, let's just do ISO 100. Okay, f2.0. And we'll take a shot of Hannah. Okay, so there is a speedlight shot. Now let's see what the settings were on this. It was 1/13th of a second. It's coming in a second. So there was a little bit of a shutter blur, right? Speedlights, right? Did I sell you on speedlights? Y'all want to buy one now from this shot? No? Right. So we got to do some work, right? That's the thing. This is only a tool. It's like a hammer, right? A camera, all the new technology that comes out. You know, you get a faster, bigger blade for your saw, right? Does that mean you're going to build a better house? No. You know, you might be able to cut wood faster, angle it different ways, but that has nothing to do with what you will create with it. So just remember that as much as we're talking about gear, it's really your vision and the way that you work with the tools that creates the great shot. Aperture value mode will try to give you the right exposure without the strobe first. That's what's nice about it. A lot of times it will try to create a pleasing ambient exposure and then subtly add the flash. But if you shoot in manual mode, and I'll say, okay, well, I'm just going to control the shutter speed and the aperture, and then let the camera be in ETTL. So I have this camera, the flash, sorry, in ETTL mode. Set the flash, and what that means is it's metering through the lens. It's through the lens metering. And it takes a little pre-flash just before the shutter opens, and it bounces back. The camera and the flash and the camera talk and say, okay, this is probably just the right amount of flash based on the reflectivity of the subject and this, that, and it comes back. So to take the camera blur off, let's do another shot, 1/100th of a second. That should be just fine. Okay, now we should avoid that. So that's a good question. When you shoot in aperture value mode, it's going to try to give you an ambient exposure, and it may drag your shutter speed too slow in a dark area. So here it is, now 100th of a second at f2 there. Okay, well, sure. So that's 100th of a second where we don't have any camera blur, and that is at, is that 1/100th too? Yeah. Well, maybe I just had a shaky hand for that one. Yeah, that's probably it. Okay. All right, so what can you do if you only have one flash, right? And it's on your camera and you got to make it work and you got to get a halfway decent photo of somebody in a tight space. My suggestion is always, a lot of times, for most situations, and I can think of glamour photography where they like that new school flash look, and that's fine. But my suggestion is get your flash and at least the light in some way off the camera. So for me, I would say the easiest thing I could do is to bounce it to the ceiling or to the side of the wall somewhere that way. So let's try that. Now again, the nice thing is we can stay in ETTL mode, so this flash can just stay just like this. I could do a little bit of, there's a little bounce card on here that will kick a little bit of catch light in our subject's eyes this way. You can use your hand, you can use a piece of paper, doesn't much matter. And then let's try one bouncing off the side, and we'll see how this starts to evolve our look. So I'm in I'm in manual mode, 100th of a second at f2.0, ISO 100. Okay, take a look at how more pleasing this is going to be. It's not a great shot yet, but as it comes in, it's definitely more pleasing light, right? Big difference, huge difference. So this is the main reason why you want to, this is what allows us, those of us who own, an SLR camera, to start making shots that start look more professional, that, you can have some craft to them. And the main thing is, and that's how we separate from our, iPhone shots and such, is to get the flash off the camera. So this is all a bounce. Again, you can read this, you can see the catch light in Hannah's eyes there. Maybe it's just a little bit above the center of the camera that way. So let's take it try another way. Let's bounce the light this way. Now again, the great thing is I'm in the ETTL mode, so I don't have to say, oh, I have to bring the flash up 3 more stops because it's going off of this and it's going here. Now it might be a little strange because it's bouncing off all the colors that are coming onto this projector and such, but who knows? We'll give it a try. And the other thing I'm seeing that's interesting as I look at it is that she's got the light from the light panel. We need this light on so that this tutorial is videotaped and will be on the web, so we do need to have these lights on Hannah. So that creates a little bit of a challenging setup that way. But let's just see what happens as she has this light panel on her face.
Just wipe out what's on the screen. So it would be white light back?
Oh, pretty likely, right? Yeah, the flash will probably overpower anything that's on the screen. So it'll go, all right, thanks. So we turned off the light panel. Nice. I didn't know we were allowed to do that. That's outstanding. Good. We'll just run the whole thing without it. And then I'm going to frame her just slightly on the left side of the frame since the light's coming from the right. It might look a little more interesting that way. Okay, so here we can see. Now again, I haven't asked Hannah to do anything special. We're not going through poses yet because we're just doing the basics to show you how this works. So that's ETTL mode. Maybe it's a little bright as a shot. Maybe just a hair of camera shake in here. I'm just trying to hold with one hand. So a couple things I would do here. We can bring our shutter speed up to 200th of a second. It's not going to matter at all. In fact, you can take your shutter speed now when it's in high speed sync. I can take that shutter speed as high as I want. And the higher I take it, the more I drop out any type of ambient bleed in from the environment. So, but take a look. Now we're getting something from these two setups, right, that are quite a bit better than what we had before. So we've got a couple options. This one feels a little bright to me, so there's a couple things that you could do. One is you can take your settings down, just take it down, dial it down and stop. Press the plus minus button, roll it down, -1, try again. And we'll get to the real posing and some nice setups as we go. It's not worth using Hannah's energy right now. So there's when we roll down the exposure a little bit. That was the previous shot, a little hot. So you can do that. We can adjust I can adjust the white balance in different ways. I could bring that up if it's feeling a little too, too bluish in any way. But now you get the idea, and I can position her face in such a way. Let's try something relatively interesting off of one light. So what I see is it's too much frontal, right? We've got a weird little shadow or light, strip right here. So we can evolve this in a little better way. Let's just try this with one light. Why don't we just work on something very simple here? Why don't you put the bike on your shoulder? We'll have the bike on her right shoulder, camera left, right? And think about why I might want to do that. The main reason, as I'm seeing it, is so that the light that it's bouncing, it's not going to take the bike, too blown out. You want to try to avoid having your foreground brighter than your subject. A lot of times it's just distracting to get the viewer there. So as we look at it, yeah, that'd be great, like that. Sure, that'll work great. That's a good start right there. And I'm going to have you look just a little bit more, so I can position myself. If you look a little, we'll look this way, and then we'll have a little more pleasing light. Yep. And then okay, keep your head that way, and then you can look with your eyes this way at me like that. Let's just try it. Yep. I might take that. Well, if I take it horizontal, we'll miss that bounce. But okay. So take a look here as this comes in. And again, I haven't rehearsed any of this with her. We're working through it and just figuring it out. And I'm not getting a super compelling pose from her yet. But now we have some light and shadow. I think there's probably maybe too much light on this side of her, of her cheek. Perhaps we could add a little more shadow for it to be interesting. So we can do that a couple ways. One is just have her look slightly more this way, and I can angle myself, and then we'll have a little more shadow on that side. So let's try it. Let's bring that back up, and let's have you turn your torso that way. She's pretty square this way, so now we'll start thinking in just basic composition, and we'll build this all up. But relatively square, doesn't look all that great, right? So let's get to a little more active pose, right? So we're going to have you take your torso, even turn it even more that way, okay? And then come to me that way, and then bring the bike like that. But keep your shoulders as best you can, facing, that way. And then, okay. And then the bike seat, I want to make sure that's not intersecting with your eyes that way. Can you let this handles go like that, or just come in a weird way? That's fine. Yeah, like that might work. Yeah, let's get it closer to you, right? About like that. That's great. Okay, good. And then look at me that way. Sure, great. Let's try that. And then go ahead and kind of bring your chin down and then come up. And when you're ready, come up right, and you can kind of meet me there. And I think that I want you to turn. We're going to both all rotate just a little bit this way to get a little more shadow on your face. Yep, good. Let's try that. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So here we're telling a little bit of a story of cyclists, right? And a lot of times when you're doing a portraiture shoot or an athlete, you have to do a couple things. You have to do, action sports, but then you also want a portrait. If you're doing a magazine assignment of some kind, you might want some 2-page spreads of, biking and the beautiful road, and you get low down, you get the yellow line on the road and the cyclist, but then you also want a portrait for, the cover, the table of contents page, or whatever. So here you can see how we're starting to craft some more interesting light with a one-light setup. And we're trying to tell the story with the minimal amount of elements possible, right? Do we need to include the whole bike? You can put it down too for a second. Do you need to include the whole bike, both wheels, the pedals, to tell the story of Hannah being a top competitive cyclist? No. The idea is how, and think about this, and this is for me the most exciting part of photography, is how do you reduce what's in your frame and and elevate the power of it? And that to me is real poetry. So that's where this happens. I'm not saying that we nailed it through this, right? There's probably a lot of other options to look through the wheels, to have her down on the on the arms of the the hand grips of the cycle as well. So we'll look at some of those, but you get the idea at least, and think about that as you're approaching your own photography. What storytelling elements need to be in my frame? Most importantly, what can be out? Because that's where your shots are going to get stronger. So this is just, we're moving through this quickly so I can get to the multiple Speedlite setups, and so we can get to put Hannah on the training stand and get some real action shots that way. Okay, great. So let's move to multiple light setup, start to get our Speedlights off the camera, and move into this, more of what's called a professional lighting setup. The first thing I like to think of is what can you do with just one Speedlight for the most dramatic look? Doesn't mean the best look, but how can you create some real drama with one Speedlight? And for me, this is the same when I'm shooting outdoors. Is I like to position, as I was just telling this gentleman, often have your sun backlit. Why is that? Because you get a separation a lot of times of light. You're getting a wide gamut of light and shadow and some differential from your background. So this is just a black backdrop for that example. But anytime you're outdoors, if you shoot backlit, your subject will stand out a lot of ways from your background, particularly if you're shooting through trees or other things like that. You just want to expose your photo so that your subject's not just a dark silhouette, but actually stands out. You do that two ways. One is go into manual mode. The other is use an aperture value mode and just overexpose your image a lot of times. Overexpose the aperture value mode so that your subject's not a silhouette if the sun's screaming in. And then add your flash from there. Okay, so let's go to, I'll put on a Speedlight here. We've got one. Let's work with, what do we have? Yeah, work with that. The strip's just fine. We can work with that one. What mode is that one, or what group is that? It doesn't matter because it'll pick them all up.
A and B.
Okay, great. So for this, we'll start doing a little bit of portraiture. This will just be standing, and then once we get this set up, then we'll get you on the training stand and shoot some real stuff there. Okay. So a couple thoughts. One thing I like to do is, and before you even add a light, if you're in any type of situation, and if you're in a studio situation, first thing you might want to do is figure out what's the light in the rest of your environment doing, right? So that's a very big deal. So before I turn on this transmitter, the STE3, let's take some test shots and see what happens if I'm at ISO 100, 200th of a second, or I can go to 250th, since that's my sync speed on the 5D Mark III, and I'm at f2.0. What does the light look like? I don't know. We'll see. Right now it's telling me that I'm underexposed quite a bit. Yeah, that's great. I turned it off. I'm just doing a test. And the main thing is I want to look and see if there's any ambient light bleeding in. And why? Because the light that's bleeding in is a totally different color temperature. It's coming in from, there's stuff coming in from the projector, from the light panels, from all sorts of fluorescent lights in the background. So now I know that this shot, okay, there's the info on it there. Anyway, that we're completely dark in the background. That's good. What that means is the lights that I add will be my own, and I want that to happen. Now, if we're shooting outdoors, which I do most of the time, sure, then you decide how the lights are coming in and how you want to manipulate the background as we showed. But for this purpose, let's just do with entirely our lights. So Eric, let's just start with just this one light. Here, yes please, yep. On. And let's bring it around to the front shot, yep. Okay. Great. And then we'll have the bike up on your shoulder and we'll go back. So these are small light modifiers that work with the Speedlites. They're Westcott, they're Octabanks, and essentially to show you under the hood here of what they are. And the main thing is I used to be intimidated by these soft boxes because they're big and they look, all pro, you don't know what's going on, but essentially they're just umbrellas that fold down and they bounce the light around in there. And the main thing is they're bouncing the light off and spreading it all around, so there's no actual direct light hitting your subject. It's hitting this metal reflector, which is then bouncing into this, so that the light is very diffused. You do lose, whatever it is, maybe a few, 2-3 stops of power out of these Speedlites as you do this. So if you're trying to overpower daylight, you might want to, minimize your use of these. But at any time when you can, what it does is create a much more pleasing, softness. I find the shadows fall off more pleasingly than on a hard light, and we'll notice that difference as we go. Another thing to consider is, and I'm sorry, I'm chatting a bunch. You can put the bike down for a moment. And this can sometimes be counterintuitive, but how will you get the softest light on your subject? All right, think about this. Be soft here, or will the Speedlight be softest on your subject if it's here? All right, closest, right. Okay, you guys have seen some tutorials already. No first timers here, it's good. Right, and sometimes you think, well, boy, it's going to be so harsh here. Well, guess what? It needs less light. There's a lot less light output needed to be here. So it can be essentially, you have a greater fall off now too. We don't need so much light so that the fall off, I'm not going to light that black backdrop and turn it into a gray looking backdrop. Closer, now look at the size of this source. It can now wrap the light a little more pleasingly. So we have a very nice, this is great if you're shooting a woman and you want some more pleasing light. It will wrap around and it can have a real nice texture that way. We can put it up this way and have a little bit of kind of Rembrandt style lighting. Let's give it a try. I might just have you, hold it up. Sure. About yay that way. Okay, so I put the STE3 transmitter on. This transmitter, as I said, can control 15 Speedlights. The great thing about it is you can go from ETTL mode to manual mode with just a click of a button here. You can control the output. I can be in ETTL mode and say, well, go +1, go -1, or drop to manual mode, and I can change different Speedlights. I can keep a couple in TTL mode if it's crucial that there are people running around in front of me this way and that, and they're in front of the Speedlights, and I can't control that. But I really want a strong backlight, and that's on the other side of the street. Well, we can keep that one just max, keep it at full power in manual mode, and then let our run and gun Speedlights be TTL. So just some things to think about. This one, we'll just leave it at TTL. I'm at 250th of a second at f2.0, and let's see. Go ahead and bring up, and we'll just find we'll find a nice look of a portrait here. So the reason I've got the light here, remember on this side rather than here, is who's interested in having a well-lit bike seat, right? Brighter than her face, and the shadow coming across her face. That wouldn't be a great spot to put the light. We would get a heinous shadow there. So we want to position your light relative, that's going to be pleasing here. And I want to have what I'm looking at is we'll have a little bit of nose shadow, a little bit of cheek shadow, but ideally the nose shadow is not, crazy looking that way. So we'll see how we get. And that can be, and then the light should be as close as possible without being in the frame. That's going to be soft for us. And so it's in TTL. It should do the heavy lifting for us. Ready. And bring that bike seat just a little closer to you there. Just, yeah, like that. Yep. Turn your torso away from me so I get a little less shoulder. Yep. And then bike back toward me that way. Yep. Okay, and then I want this, if you can let go of that, can that come kind of that way? Can you let go of this like that? Yep, because that to me, then the bike seat is not so long in front of your face that way. Okay, look at it that way. Great. Okay. Oh, we blinked. Yep, it happens. All right, we'll do one more. We'll show you guys what happened here, and then we'll do another. Okay, ready? All right. But anyway, the shadows are looking good. The nose shadow is not distracting, but you've got light shadow. You've got a nice cheek. See that soft fall off? That's really, really nice fall off of light and shadow there. Okay. And give me less shoulder. So rotate, and I know it's hard, but this is rotate your torso, your hips, shoulders. Yep. Yep. And then come at me that way. Thank you. Okay, great. You can put the bike down for a second. So this is just ETTL, one Speedlite. You don't need an assistant for this. You can have a light stand. You can manipulate these arms. These things can bend down and such. We're getting somewhere with it. Next thing to think about is your white balance of how do you want this here. So you can do custom white balances. For all that I shoot outdoors, different light, and I love to shoot at sunset, the light can change dramatically in your color temperature, where you're shooting at 5,000 Kelvin at one point while the sun's up, and then you have to go to 7,500 or 8,000 Kelvin as the sun goes down, or you're in the bottom of a canyon. I don't mess around with a lot of custom white balances because normal, or whatever that is, doesn't interest me that much. I'm trying to just capture whatever looks good, so I'm always eyeballing that, and I'm just the same thing when I'm figuring out my exposure, right? Do I want more shadow or less shadow on her cheek? To me, that's not figuring out with a light meter of, oh, I want 2 stops less on this side of her cheek. You just look at it and say, yeah, it looks pretty good. Should we add a hair light? Well, let's add one and see what it looks like. And I think the more that you can get yourself away from the confines of the technicalities and just start to look at an image and get the emotion from it, the more you can just speak the language. So one thing we could do is let's take a look at taking our white balance. Right now it's at 5,500. Let's bring it up. Bring it up to 5,800. See what happens. It looks, yeah. See what happens there. And the next thing we can do is, if we're getting some magentas on her face, is in the white balance, the white bracket shift and balance, we can take the magentas just a slight bit out there. Okay, ready, Eric? One more. Okay, great. So this will come in a little bit warmer. You'll see as we take the white balance from 5,500 up to 5,800 now. Okay, and let's just say that we want a little magenta out of there. We can do that. So we'll go into the white balance. That's the white balance shift bracket mode. And you've got this grid here. So there's magentas on the bottom. I'll just take this and take it a click up toward the green. We'll get away from the magentas. Maybe we go, and let's just do this. There's kind of the blue and the red side here in the A too. Let's just take it toward the blue. So we've taken our grid and our white bracket up toward the green and toward the blue. Now what this allows us to do, set by hitting the OK button, is now we can take our white balance up maybe a little bit warmer, but without the magentas in there. Let's take it to 6,000. We've taken out a little bit of the magentas and the ambers there. Let's go ahead again. Thanks. Okay, that was a bright one. See what happened to it. So that's one of those ones where sometimes the ETTL doesn't nail it for you. And so what I would say, for sometimes when you can, right, if you're working in a studio situation, your subject's 2 feet away from the light, just go to manual mode, right, once it's locked in. But if you're in a high-paced situation, you're outdoors, the sun, clouds are happening, keep it in ETTL. Let's do one more, see what it does for us. And we'll check the white balance and see if that helped us at all. Thanks. Great. Okay, good, that one worked. If the second one didn't work, then I would have been stressing of what are we going to do? The Speedlites aren't working as well as we thought. But anyway, it's coming back in. So you can now see the shadow or the catch light in her face, these pleasing shadows, the nose shadow. The nose shadow sometimes, of course, it can be used a lot of ways for, to punctuate and add drama to a person. But a lot of times you just want your viewer to look past it that way. So we're getting to maybe a more pleasing white balance that way. And obviously if you're shooting in RAW, it doesn't really matter. You bring it into Lightroom or Photoshop and you mess around with all the raw color temperature there very easily. Just trying to get the baseline in camera so when it comes in it looks okay. All right, so let's start. The last thing before we get Hannah on the bike stand and start doing some action shots is let's look at, can we create a more dramatic shot with one light if we put it in another position, right? And for me, let's put it straight behind her and see what we get that way. So you switch over there, Eric. So for this, now we have the Speedlite coming this way. I don't know if it's going to look good with that Speedlite lighting the back, through the wheel and such that way. We'll find out. Now, let's see, what I think is, actually, why don't you bring it from that side, please, Eric? Sure. And then Hannah, you can step this way a little bit. And that way the light will come this way here. Yep. And then we'll move the bike seat there like that, can come back on that shoulder just a little more. That way, yep, good. Okay, now we're going to have this screaming right at the camera, yep, like that. And then Eric, we'll have that facing almost right at the camera. We'll get some flare from it and such, yep. It can come in even slightly more. That's pretty good. Let's try that. Okay, and then I'll have you maybe hold a reflector for a shot here too. So let's just try, this is ETTL, let's do without the reflector first. Just want you guys to see this as we're just playing around. That's really what creative photography is. For me, if I would just to show up on a shoot, and say, well, A, B, C light, set them up, ratio 2:1, hair light, backlight, okay, take the photo. That'd be bored silly, right? I would have to find any other profession, washing windows, whatever, brooming the streets. But fortunately, photography is not, is never that. For as much as I have a whole menu, whole reference encyclopedia in my mind of different light setups. It's always different every time, and your subject and the bike and different things. And that's, for me, what keeps it interesting. Okay, so this is ETTL. We'll see what happens. I may want to switch this to manual mode in a moment if it's not, cooperating. Let's just see what happens. Okay. It's a pretty cool look. So this is ETTL. Now we're getting something that's a little bit graphic. You can put that down anytime you want, Hannah. Yeah. So it brings it into Lightroom and it does a little thing on it. It's interesting, right? Now we're getting to something that if you saw this maybe in in a magazine or whatever, you'd say, huh, it's a start, right? I'm in it. This is more, shadowy figure. Maybe this is someone more mysterious or dramatic. Might want to, see what this article's about or whatever, what this ad campaign is. This is what you see in a lot of, Adidas or Nike campaigns and such. And obviously we're not finished there, but let's work on this. Now, what do you think the ETTL is doing in its flash output? My guess is that it's looking at the backlight and saying, hey, I don't want to overexpose this stuff too much, whatever it is in there, right? Obviously, we can't light our subject's face 100%, but hey, Tyler, I'm not going to let you just blow out these highlights. And so it's doing a very good job of controlling that because that light is quite close to her face. So that's not, not a bad start for ETTL. That's probably what I'd want anyway. I don't want blown out highlights. Let's add a little reflector here to the situation. Let's just try it with a little bit of this silver gold there, yeah. And you can come, probably what you want to do is play a little bit of the, the pool stick here, yeah. So come, and you can probably bring that right, probably lay it right here, like that type of thing, okay. Bring that here, yeah, and we'll shoot right over. A lot of times when you add a reflector, you got to shoot right over it. And that might add a little catch in her eyes, yeah, right there. Okay. Come to me here, yeah, good. Come on, focus. Okay. Oh, did that go? Let's try one more. Okay, there we go. Okay, so coming in here, I'll show you with and without the reflector. I'll come in a moment. And the main thing is that because it's an ETTL, things are changing a little bit. So if we went to manual, we might have more of an apples for apples comparison. But that's with a little bit of reflector. You can see just a catch in that left eye. And that's without, right? Can we improve on that? Sure, yeah. So let's try something. Let's just go to manual mode with the Speedlite and say, okay, I want you to do, this output, fire consistently. We can bring up the light a little bit on her face, and then we'll have, that will also magnify the reflector a little bit. So I go out of ETTL mode, It's a pretty easy thing here. Just change it to manual. And then I do, okay, what level do I want? I don't know what level I want for that Speedlite yet, but let's take a look. I'll just set it at 1/8 the power, see if that's right. And this is what we do anytime when we're shooting with any type of, any type of pro models and such. Long before our subjects have shown up, we've got the lights in place. My assistants and I have done tests and make sure that we're not wasting our, our subjects' time figuring out if we're going to, blow out their skin tones or not with at least our first setups. Okay, so this is, I'm hardly even concerned with this yet, and we're going to see the bottom of the reflector in there, because the main thing my question is, what's the 1/8 power on the Speedlite going to do relative to my setting? So bring it in. Okay, it's a little dark. It's getting there. We don't want to go a lot higher, but let's bring it up. Let's go up one more stop, right? So group A, bring it up to 1/4 power. I'm going to take just a quick, you can just stand there, see if that works. Yep. And this is really how it works all the time when we're shooting. No, it didn't fire. Okay, thanks. There we go. This is how it works all the time when we're setting up, the Speedlites. It's never, you never just do this with your, with your subjects right there, whenever possible. Okay, so we bring this in, and that's 1/4 power. Tells me, I can probably bring that up even more. I don't mind if we clip this part of her jersey. It's white, it's nylon, it's reflective, it's going to go. But her face, yeah, we go one more. So we'll bring it up. Let's go to 1/2 power. Okay, and now let's just say we're going to roll with that. Let's go here. Thank you. And then what I might do is have her just look a little more this way. Well, a couple things, and we get a more even shadow on the nose, or we look the other way and we lose the shadow on the nose. What's going to look better? I don't know yet. I'm guessing that perhaps not having the light hit the nose might be better, but let's find out. If you look this way, we'll do one where there's a little bit of light on the nose. And Eric, your hand down just a hair. The bottom there, thanks. Okay, this is kind of a side lit. A little more side lit as she's looking that way, and then let's do one where you're looking this way and we're not getting the light from your nose. Well, a lot of times what I'll do is, if you can see, I don't even have to look. I can just take a test shot and then just kind of look and see if that light is hitting her nose or not. And you can just start to read that way. Look more this way. That should be fine. Now bring the bike that way. Yep. Okay, look at me here. Yep. And interestingly, we might get some pretty cool flare from the shot this way. Bring it right close to your shoulder, the bike. I'm trying to get that story right there. Yep. Okay. Nice. And let's get that reflector as close as we can yet to her there. Thanks. Good. Thanks. Okay. We still had just a clip on the nose. So we'll redo it, but take a look. So that's more of the side light look with a little bit of reflector. You can see that catch light coming into her eye there. Is it perfectly evolved? Not yet. We can get there. Here's a little more side light. We have just a stray light on the nose. This is a good thing to keep in mind, because it really, in my mind, it's a, it's kind of a missed shot that way when you get that. And so watch that, particularly if you're working with your subject in the sun. My favorite way to position a subject for a portrait is backlit with that sun raking over their shoulder, lights up their hair real nice, and just make sure that they're turning in just a way that you're not getting sunlight onto their nose. And that's pretty much a nice, perfect raking side light. And then expose your picture for that. The other thing I would suggest is, if you can, add a little diffusion, add a little scrim to take down that backlit sun from your subject. And then you can just add a little reflector or Speedlite to it. Okay, let's do one more where we, essentially what I would do is, rather than having you move around a lot too, we can just move this back to here. I could raise this up and we can shoot through it, or I can just shoot right underneath it here, but it'll be fine. Okay, that's great. Okay, and then you can get that reflector. It can probably be right about, yay, there. Good. Okay, thanks. And ready. We'll look right at the camera. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay, so what if we wanted to get a little more light in our subject's eyes here as we're doing this portrait, right? And there's not quite enough, the reflector didn't really give it to us, right? That's where the reflector's not working. What should we do? We can add another light for a catch light there. Question is, do we want that light to just light her entirely evenly? That's fine. Do we want to have a dramatic, down thing to add something? We've still got this shadow on her nose. We'll watch that. So there's a couple things we can do. One is just raise that light up and bring it behind a little bit. But then let's add a little bit of a second light to the situation. So here, we can use any one. It doesn't really matter. Great. So that comes up. Let's turn this one on. Okay. So this light, we'll call it our A light. This is our B. And let's go for something. If we put this one in, it can be in manual mode. And the reason I'd say in manual mode, because if it's in ETTL, it's going to probably overexpose more than I want, right? The subject's going to be lit like that full flashlight. Now all I want is just the lightest little, accent punctuation there. So I've got a 1/2 power for my backlight. So I know if I take my front light, the B mode here, go to B. I hit B plus, go to B manual mode, B plus minus. Let's take that down to an eighth of a stop. Okay, that's a half or eighth power. This is 1/2 power coming that way, 1/8 power. I might even take it down to 1/16 power on this, and we'll see what happens. Okay. So Eric, for this, what I suggest you guys do when you're setting up your strobes is to consider always the shadow that's under your subject's chin. That's kind of a big deal. A lot of times you don't want a light underneath their chin. So the light can come up higher, and it might look interesting to have a little bit of light and shadow on the helmet and such. So let's put this up a little bit higher. Now these things can rotate in some way. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so why don't you hold this, and we'll kind of do it, yay, something like that. Yeah. Okay. Okay, we'll just do a test here. 1, 2, 3. Again, I have no idea what that light's going to do yet. So this is how we test all the time when we're building in terms of the power output of it, right? It's 1/16 power. Is it going to help? Yeah, it's starting to. I think we need some more backlight here to make it dramatic. So here's what I would do is I would add stronger backlight now. And I might reduce this just a little bit, and we'll hold it even closer to her eyes so it falls off more on her face. But so the backlight, and this is really how we're playing with it. I go to the group A. I roll up, and we set that. Let's just bring it up a little more power. Give it one more stop. Okay, and then we'll hold this pretty close to her. Let's see what happens. Okay, and you can get that right in on her now, Eric. Thanks. Okay. Great. And was that the same height where it was before, or was it about there? Okay. Good. Thanks. Okay. So we've got a little more backlight now. It should light her hair up a little more. We should see a little more reflection coming through, maybe a little more rake on her cheek there. Just a little bit. So it's coming up that way. We're getting to something that's slightly interesting. It's coming along, but I want to take it to some other levels. But you see how that back hair light is helping add a little bit of accent to things here. So we're getting somewhere. Now you can see the catch light coming up here. We have a nice little nose shadow. It's starting to come together as a shot, and we've got some light raking in here, but we're not hitting her nose. It's coming together as a shot. Let's keep evolving it, but let's evolve it. Let's do some more interesting things with limited time. Get her onto the bike's trainer stand, have her working here, and start shooting some, call it, a mix of portraits and action shots. Put that back on a stand, and we'll just get it just slightly out of the shot. We'll see what happens. And probably what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to take my ISO up, take it up to ISO 400, because we're just going to have kind of a rim light on here, and this bike will be kind of backlit and interesting. Hold it up quite high, so just hold it sideways so that it's not coming into the shot. Yeah, and then just bank it in and take it further right back to the wall like that. Yep, exactly. And then slightly up, Eric, so it's not, and then right at the camera, we'll get some cool flare. Yep. Let's see what happens. Is that kind of what you're asking for? We'll find out. Okay. So I brought up my exposure by 2 stops. This light is now bouncing off the walls as well, and a lot of fill is coming from that. But there's our shot. Not bad. Interesting. The reason we're getting, and you're seeing it a little bit, is this, this ceiling walls and such are are going that way. We're in a small space, so it would be hard to, essentially if we were doing this in a real, in a larger studio, we wouldn't have a white wall 2 feet away from our subject or a white wall 8 feet this way, because all that light's filling if we want it to be more dramatic that way. So that's part of what's happening with this shot. We are getting these highlights, but it's filling in more than we might want.
I like it.
So,
it's not what I thought, but
yeah.
I like it.
It's not what I thought too. I was thinking that it would be much darker on the front of our subject, but then I started looking around and saying, oh yeah, well, that's why. We've got all this fill around us. So if you were in another studio, how could you get your way around this? Well, you could just hang up more black curtains here and here. And that's a good way also if your subject has sunglasses on or whatever it is, which we'll go to take away any reflections. If you put up a black wall behind you, that way you don't see all the other hoopla going on behind that way. Yeah. Okay, so let's get Hannah onto a stand, on a trainer stand, and we'll roll through some, kind of some action shots. And I'm going to go to a slightly different look of a setup for this too. I want to go for, let's just call it, an Adidas kind of boxing campaign. Maybe not a womanly beauty portrait, but it's one that I think it's a good one for you guys to have in your back pocket of accent lighting, chiseling edge lights that works really well to make an athlete look really powerful. So for that, what I will do is I'll work with these strip banks. These softbox comes in strip banks like this. They come in soft boxes or smaller different real small soft boxes. Well, I have another one around I was going to work with. I often work with these smaller lights. These are just a real small softbox that fits in a bag, and it definitely improves your light, many times over a bare bulb Speedlite. But what is best about these is that they have that interior beauty dish that's really spreading the light around, so it's far bigger than what you might get out of a normal Speedlite. Okay, so for this, let's set up something interesting. Let's set up some chiseling side lights that are going to rake on either side of her face. As you saw when I lit some of the skiers and snowboarders outdoors, we lit them at 90-degree angles to each other there. Sometimes that maintains a rib of shadow, which is interesting. Can be, particularly when you're shooting in the outdoors, it's nice to have that shadow to connect your subject to the same shadows that are in the environment. And that's what maintains the authenticity of it. Your subject doesn't feel as cut out from the background. So let's do, if this Speedlite I think is already set up as an A, we'll turn this off for now. We'll add it once we get to where we need to be. Let's work with our lights as a B and a C, and we're going to have these come kind of chiseling in this way. And we'll add one light at a time. You always want to add one at a time so that you know what each light is doing. And this one is C, and that one's B, Eric, is that right? Okay. So let's add our B light first. And you can really eyeball it. You can also, if you're just setting up, you can just kind of take a test shot and say, well, here's a little modeling lamp that way. If you press this red button down here on the back, the strobe, it really allows you to see how that light's hitting. Is that going to hit her nose or not? Where's that light and shadow disappear? So that's a helpful tool if you're working on yourself, in a quick setup that way. Okay, so come on down on the stand there. I'm just going to see how that light's looking. And Eric, I think for speed, we'll just have you position those lights around and look off this way a little bit there. Okay, bring that light around that way more. What I'm more looking is, can we set up this light to rake her cheek here without, getting a big light on her nose? But bring it around that way a little more. Okay, and now I'm going to set Hannah up here in such a way that she's looking slightly off camera. She's going to be biking a bit, and we'll get her into more of a kind of a sports pose this way. But I'm not going to work her too hard until we get all of our lights set up. So this will be essentially, we can move toward a 4-light setup for this. What time is it, Eric? Or how are we doing on time?
It's 5:25.
5:25. Okay, great. So we've got about 20, let's call it 20 minutes or so, and in the next 20 minutes, I'll work. I've taken a while building you guys through the different setups. Next 20 minutes, let's build through up to 4 lights, and we'll accelerate the instructions since you guys have already seen how this works. So 1 light, I have, which one's on? B is on. Let's turn C off. Yep, it shows me that C is on the top here. Is that going? Okay, so we have just turn that one off, please. So we'll just start with 1.
That's C over there.
Okay, that's fine. Sure. Okay, C is on. C is ETTL. Let me turn that to manual. manual C, and let's do quarter power for it. See what happens. And did that fire? No. Did that fire? Yeah. Okay. So here it comes. Here's our first light. Call it our C light. Doesn't much matter. You can sometimes do A, B, C, or go around in a clockwise, whatever works here. It's a great shot. You want to keep that one? Yeah. But what it tells me is that's a pretty good thing here. I can look at my histogram. I have a highlight alert flashing on the back here. I use that a lot. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a flashing highlight, but to me it's telling me that it's flashing right here. It's not flashing there, so we're holding what we need to hold. That to me is pretty good. We have just a little bit of light on her nose, but we can watch that and have her look just slightly more to her left when she's cycling. Let's add the B. Now let's add that light. Yeah, B light there. Okay, now she's going to be looking this way, Eric, and I want to avoid the nose shadow, so you're going to bring that even back more behind her. Let's try that. Yep. See what happens. So these strip banks, what they do, you can set them horizontal or vertical. If you wanted a nice wrap and a nice soft, right, we can rotate it. Have it more soft or diagonal a lot of times. It can work really well if you're shooting someone's face, but you don't want to light, their white shirt or something too much. You can angle it in different ways, so it's hitting their face and then falling off more dramatically as it gets down their torso. But for this, we want some edge lighting, and I don't want to wrap as much around her face. Okay, so for this, you can just look that way. Now we'll turn on B. Okay, B. I will turn to the same power. B plus quarter power. Okay, so we're getting a lot of fill coming in from the background of the room, and this is looking pretty good on the cheeks. Ideally, we'd have maybe even a little less fill. Like in an ideal world, I don't think we have another black backdrop. I would say the first thing I would do is add a black screen here so that we don't have as much fill, because I really would like to get this more underexposed on her. But as we see, if I shoot, just to show you again, if I shot without the Speedlites, I'm pretty sure, let me make sure. Yeah, I'm just showing without the Speedlights. This is an exposure without it. It'll come in a second. See, we're not getting any light on her. So all that light is coming from the reflection in the background of the room there. So we'll do the best we can in this situation, but know that if we really want to take it dramatic and just lose all this here, we would just set up a black screen here. But we're working in a small space, so you get the idea. Now, before we really get into it here, we're getting close. What else do we want to do? And then we're going to really go through the motions, and make Canon look great and really get some top shots. We probably want a little bit of a background light, right? It's two-dimensional right now. Let's add another light for the background. Eric, we have one other light around. I've got another Speedlite here. Okay. And we'll set this to, what? That would be a BCD D mode, please. Yep. And what else do we want? We'd have this on standby just for a little bit of catch light in her eyes as well. Now I don't want this one to be too bright, because what I want really is this chiseling side light that's coming in, but I just want just a little catch light. And we'll say that that's going to come, if she's looking this way, it's going to come from about here. Now again, I don't want it too low, lighting under her chin, so I can raise it up a little bit. This will give us a kind of natural shadow that way. Maybe a little bit. Raise it up just a bit. Another little trick, if you're shooting outdoors and you're shooting a subject and their shirt's lit up, too much, or they've got a white shirt on, is you can just spill that light, hit their face, and just spill it this way, and that way it's not going to light their shirt too much. We do this all the time with softboxes that way. You can do really easy gradients in Lightroom or Photoshop to get rid of it, but this is a really quick way to hit the light on your subject and not illuminate their shirt too much. So I might actually do that as I think about it here, is get the stand a little bit lower. Yeah, a little bit. Okay, so we've got a background light now. And is that lit? Let's raise that up, Eric, so that it's right here in this zone, right behind her. She's going to be looking this way. So let's have that light in the halo kind of behind her there. I'll set you up as you go. Okay, and then just where I don't see it, so it's got to be just a little bit. It can be, sure, yeah, why don't you take it, actually take it to, yeah, let me try that. No, if you take it to the other side, please, Eric, maybe, there. Yep. And then adjust the zoom. The one nice thing that you can do with these Speedlites is adjust the zoom setting. So put that on like a 24 millimeter. And so the zoom setting is the one thing that you have to do, let's just say in person with those Speedlites. I can control everything else, but the zoom settings you can take from 24 millimeters up to 200 millimeters. Another thing that's new with these Speedlites, with the 600s versus the 580s, is that you can go to a 200 millimeter zoom setting. So essentially it means it's kind of like a focus stage light. You can essentially call it, you get an extra one stop of output out of the strobe. You don't actually get more power out of those 4 AA batteries, but by focusing the light more intensely, you get a longer throw, and it gives you an extra stop, which is helpful, when you need to do that in a hard light situation. Okay, so that is our D light. Let's look at D. Go to D in manual mode. What should we have for a power? Let's try it at 1/4 power. Take a quick test. Get a focus here. Okay, and we're gonna. Okay, so we've got a little bit of, maybe a little too much on the D light. We've got a little bit of flare coming in too, but it's interesting. It starts to make it interesting. Well, we're getting to a spot, and obviously I'm not, dialed on the focus on her eyes yet, but we're getting to something that's a little bit interesting. And let's make sure that D, the background light, is hitting right around this zone. We're going to kind of bring our viewer's eyes up here. And then we'll add just a little bit on, call it our A light. So this is going to get in the way of the monitors, sorry, but you can look on those ones too as we build it. I want the background light, yeah, so I should, rather than rushing right, I should try to get that background light to light up this area, Eric. So let's do it. The other option that we could do is just to bring it behind this stand. It might illuminate a little bit better for us there. Let's do it, yeah, probably. It would be just out of frame if it was probably here, let's say. Sorry there. Yep, something like that. Okay. The next thing we could do would be kind of a cool addition in our quick setup is these sticky filters here can go onto your Speedlites that come in all different colors. Let's add a slightly cool background light, and then it'll allow our subject to be a little bit warmer. So this is just a blue light here. Eric, I'll give this to you if you stick that on there. Cool thing about them is they just stick right on, just like little blue stickers, and that's going to cool our background light off. You can watch this heat. Just stick it right onto the front. So another thing that's just fun to keep in mind is if you want to, let's just say your background is feeling pretty cool and you want to make it look warm, autumn, fall, afternoon type of light. Here's something that's slightly counterintuitive that's fun to do is you can add a blue light on the strobe to your subject. And what does that allow you to do? Well, it allows you, now you can crank your white balance, right? You can crank your white balance maybe to 7,000 or so to compensate for that blue light. So your subject looks normal. Now your background is nice, warm, happy, bright, has a nice fall, September look to it. So that it can be somewhat counterintuitive in the sense that you can use a blue gel on a strobe to make the scene look warmer by compensating with your white balance. Okay, let's see what this does. This light is not yet on. We're going to add that last. Okay. So that is a lot of blue. See what happens here as it comes in. So a couple things I might do is we might move that closer, and we'd have to compensate now with that white balance for it, but we're going to have some color separation. Interesting that the So let's move that closer. Yeah, let's just try that real quickly. See what happens. A, B, C. Oh, fire in here for me. Yep. Okay. Oh, B, C, D. Yep, we're firing. Okay. And so we're just honing in on that background and the color of that before we move forward. Making sure that is C firing there. We'll make sure. And then we'll add B, sorry. Did that fire that time? Yep. Might not have. Okay. I don't know if it did. Maybe it did. Let's just look and make sure it fires. Yeah, there it goes. Okay. All right, so now we've got some color temperature, some depth that's coming in there. I might take my white balance just a slightly bit warmer. We can warm up on her cheeks. That was just the test shot to see if it was firing. So I'll take my white balance. Right now it's a 6,000. I could take it to 6,200. It'll give us some depth here. Let's add this A light. Now this is just a little bit of catch. We don't want it to be too much. So I'll go to here. Right now it's at full power because it was our backlight before. So I go to A. Yeah, we'll bring it down. Let's just do it at an 1/8 power. Okay, we're honing in on our shots here, and then I'll get kind of lower, build in a little bit of the bike. Okay, that's too much with the A, I think. You'll start to see. So this is how we figure it out. I'll just bring that A down a little bit. It looks a little overlit. But we're getting to something. So I can bring that down a little bit. But you can see the catch light and what that's adding to the situation. So bring A down. Right now it's at 1/8 power. Yeah, let's just bring it down. Probably 2 stops. You can see that nose shadow here. I really want it just to be a little bit of a fill and not a full thing. I still want to keep this with some mystery. So I'm thinking even, boy, I might even bring it down even more rather than 2 stops. Let's bring it down 3 stops. See what happens. Now our next iteration, the things that are gonna really change it for our subject here, is to make some realism, is to make it look like Hannah's working, is sweating, and that's going on. So we'll have her kind of go through, and this is where a couple things I suggest. This is you can use tanning oil or body oil, that type of thing when working with an athlete. Particularly in Colorado where we work, it's really dry, it's not humid, so as soon as you spritz them with water, it's evaporated within 30 seconds. This will allow it to stay on a little bit. Can you put a little bit of this on your face, cheeks, and arms, please? Thank you. There's that. And then we can take a little bit of water, and then we'll spritz this onto her temples and such. And do you have sunglasses with you too, Hannah? Yeah, great. We'll get those on, and then we'll go to kind of the finished look. And again, this is too lit. We're going to keep working with that A light and make sure that it doesn't look so overlit right here. And the next thing I might do too is this is a zoom on a 24. It's lighting the background maybe a little more than I might want. It's lighting it a little heavy on the left versus the right. So 2 things. You can just angle it a little bit to the right, and then I can change the zoom setting. There's that zoom. And let's take that to, let's try it at 80 millimeters. See what happens rather than 24. Okay. And you'll see what's going to be really interesting is to watch how this body oil really helps accentuate and bring out muscle tones. If we had time, what I would really do with an athlete, no matter who they are, is go down, do a bunch of push-ups, get the arms, starting to look a little more buff. Do a bunch of squats, get the legs going. That will really bring out more muscle tone that way. Have your subject breathing and such. And don't be afraid to ask your subjects to do this. You're going to make them look better, and go through. So as I'm sharing with Hannah, I'm saying, okay, we want this to look, really athletic. I want you to be breathing, huffing and puffing, looking like you're engaged in the sport, and we're going to get something that looks really muscular. Okay. Did you have it on your cheeks too here? Okay, great. All right, so you can do that on yourself, or just spritz it around. If you have a mister, that works fine. Otherwise, you just kind of spritz it around. Okay, watch your eyes. All right. It works pretty well. It's always, sweat seems to come out of the temples area quite a bit there.
It's so much easier than training. It's
so much easier. I know. It looks like you've been working so hard. Okay. Good. Okay, let's look at that. Okay, good. Great. Okay, sunglasses on. We might have a little bit on the legs, in case we see in there. Okay, great. Let's give that a look. And remember, we dropped our A. We adjusted our backlight a little bit. Sunglasses on. Now, there's going to be some reflection in the sunglasses, okay? And we know that going into it. There's a couple things you can do. You can buy dulling spray for sunglasses that will take off some of the reflectivity real nice when you're shooting with, goggles or sunglasses. So, all right, Hannah, I want you to be pedaling and just start breathing. So a lot of times when you're shooting subjects, no matter what you're doing with someone, they're just tight-lipped, they're tight-jawed when they're standing there. And you want someone running, and they'll run like this because there's 6 people watching them and cameras. And make sure, I tell our subjects, breathe through your mouth. Relax your shoulders, get into it. I want to have you breathe through your mouth, get some intensity in your eyes. Ask your subjects to focus with their eyes on a plane and look somewhere. Because otherwise, if you're just looking and you're spacing out, so if I'm not focused on anything, you can see my eyes right now, I'm not looking at anything. And as soon as I latch on to something, my pupils sharpen that way. And you want that focus in your subject's eyes. So give them a break. That actually takes time, or it takes energy, and you can't hold that for more than 10 seconds at a time, if that. So I always ask my subjects, look down, kind of moisten your cheeks. I'm having her bike, and she's hopefully getting tired as I'm chatting away here, because that's what we want. Have them kind of blow out, relax. It's all the tension is held in their jaws. Look down, and then come up to the camera and focus on something right there. And then I get them right when they're coming up. And all the time, that's what works for me. Okay, so for framing, we're going to look at, you're going to look this way, Hannah. Yep. And I'm going to have you, if you can, kind of bring your, if you're at a decent level, you can kind of come low to that down. I want to, even though it maybe looks a little bit fake when I come down that way, you've got your bike, you've got your, let's take these gloves out, because it was looking like a hunchback there. Yeah, put those on. Get that down. And then my composition here, I'll leave a little bit of negative space on one side, whether, just because negative space is pleasing in some ways, but we have room for type or whatever else that we might want to do. Great. And so then you're kind of looking off this way, as though you're competing in a race here. Now we still have to check and see what our A light and our our background light are going to do. But let's see. So we're getting somewhere. So you can see how see what the sweat and this oil is doing now with some nice definition on the arms this way and on her face. Starting to bring in something that's more interesting. I'm going to get you kind of lower down to the bar that way and keep going. I'm going to have you breathing through your mouth. We've got just a little bit of catch light. I could bring it up. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have so much reflection from the front. I really wish we could keep this more shadowy in the foreground, but we're just fighting with a lot of reflection here and light coming on. So one thing we can do is we could take, let me just try quickly if I bring the ISO down to 200. I know we're not going to get the same power output, but will we get something a little more mysterious? If I turn this off entirely, will we get something a little shadowy or more shadowy in the front? Let's see. Okay, good. It might be getting just enough fill, even without this light on, to give us something. Let's just see what happens here. Now, we need it. We need just a little bit of fill. Okay, let's turn it back on. So this is the process. But you start to see we're getting something that's graphic and it's coming together here. Okay, good. Take a stop for a second. Now, if we were not doing this in the sense of a tutorial, once I got the light set up, we would shoot at least a couple hundred frames of this. So we're starting to get there. I still think what I'm probably going to do is bring my ISO back up because I want to get this lights here. So bring my ISO back up to 400. That way we're maintaining this light that's coming here. And we're just going to have to live with this being, a little brighter than we might want. Note for next time again would be that black backdrop. And let's bring a little bit of catch here. Let's just keep that. Okay, great. And then let's just go through some of the best iterations that we can. Now it comes to working with our subject, trying to find some good poses, and then varying, from a horizontal to a vertical shot. And Eric, I may have you move that one away just a little. We'll see as I go for a horizontal shot. Okay, good. And what I want to try to do, have you breathing through your mouth, Hannah. And I want to try to get, if I can, I'll try a horizontal shot. Move that light just a little more, Eric, thanks. And I'm going to do a few options and we can cycle through them. 1, 2, 3. Okay. We're seeing a little bit of the backdrop as I do this, but I think it's probably best to stay vertical given the confines of the space here. Okay, go ahead and come real low down there. Yeah, thanks. Good. Nice. I'm going to try some. I'll give you some options. I'm going to come in tighter. Nice, Anna. Good. Thanks. Just want to focus. We'll go through these all, and we'll kind of look and see what happens as we go. I'm just going to shoot a few. Coming in real tight. I'm not including all of the helmet in here. Kind of varying my compositions. See if I can focus there. Okay, great. Pause for a second. Now give me one. Hop off the saddle, stay there, and come right onto the handlebar and put your arms, kind of rest your hands down like that. Yep. As best you can, kind of, butt back. We could even almost cheat you off of the saddle so you can come right at the camera that way. But that'll probably work. Yeah. Actually, try hop off. Yeah, the straddle. Come to the other side of the bike, and then you'll come. Now we have these lights set up. We're more or less in a great spot. You can come real low like that. Yep, real good. Yeah, good. Good kind of. Yeah, and let's do one that's kind of a aggressive pose that way with our hands. Yeah, yep, kind of fists that way. Good. Let's see what happens. So what's nice about this, we'll look at it in a second. So if it works, I'm just getting a touch of that backlight. Can you just pull that? I can probably cheat it just a hair here. Okay, come right at me here. Good. Okay, and you get the idea. The backdrop's a little bit see-through in the back here, but check out this shot. Is we've got these edge lights that are coming in. Come on in, Lightroom. We got a little bit of fill. It's giving us some color. You can see that in the upper right of the blades of her sunglasses there. You can see the sweat and the oil. What's cool about this, I think, in terms of a portrait, is that you know that she's a cyclist, but how much are we actually showing of the bike, right? About as little as you possibly could. Of course, it's the gloves, the shirt, the hat, or the helmet that play in, but look how little that helmet I'm putting in the frame too. The point is, let's shoot and get to this. Ideally we could shoot even a tighter portrait, but then we'd lose this part of the bike. Shoot it like this, then you can decide, well, maybe we don't need to. We know she's a cyclist if we crop it here. But here you've got the option. I'm giving the least amount I could to still show the helmet. Compelling kind of raking light there, a little bit of catch light. You can see the octobank lit up there. And again, as I said, it would, I would start with a much darker foreground, but we can't have that in the confines here. And then the cycle. So that's the idea of creating. Once you get that, let's look at some of the other things we did too here. Now, also given the space, you see we got a little bit of stray on the right, and part of that's just the whatever that is on the right. There's some different tones in the backdrop there, so you get the idea. Here's where we had to move a little bit of the backlight there, but the light becomes pretty interesting, right? It starts to look a little bit crafty. Here you can see the fall off as we get down along her back, shooting at f2.0. I like having that sense of blurry and that depth there. I'm having her, so she's looking off one way, so there's room there. On the right, it's kind of for type as she's looking through. I think these look best as a vertical, really, because our backdrop, it's a little limited right here. We get the idea. This one here, and how that's working. So while we have these light setups, I'm happy to try. We have 10 minutes. I'm happy to do any other light setups if you guys want to say, hey, you know, Tyler, show me whatever it is with these two lights or this light or what happens with a bare bulb here. Are there any other light setups in your own workflows, you know, or any things that you guys want to learn?
I'm seeing that almost directly overhead.
Yeah, cool. So you want to see just one light maybe right overhead.
Well,
Yeah.
keep these two and add
Keep
that,
it and add it in overhead.
and
Let's do it.
try just that by stuff.
Let's do it. That sounds great. Yep. An overhead look can be really, really cool. I might even suggest that we go to just like the smallest softbox. I'm just looking at that little circular softbox or something and just have that just right overhead. Could be pretty cool lighting on the bike, even maybe from a little bit behind. But let's do the same setup. We've got all the lights dialed. Eric, let's just hold that straight overhead. Yep. Let's do this now. Okay. Let's do that same portrait that we have here, Hannah. Yeah, it's a nice, you know, static setup. We're not going to miss a moment with your legs, your body going up or down. Okay, and then again, notice the composition and why this maybe has some, you know, compelling action to it. We're kind of using that rule of thirds. Again, she's on the upper left, you know, leaving, let's call it 2/3 on the right of negative space, and then she's up on the upper third here, 2/3 of foundation down below. It's kind of my go-to of, you know, how to do a quick, good framing.
I mean, directly overhead.
Oh, you want to go right here?
Let's see what happens. Oh, want to try another test? Went that time?
I think so, yeah.
All right, we'll do it again. Here we go. Okay. Cool. All right, we'll let it come in. We can compare it. There's the test, and here comes the next one. Okay, so there's that. And that's pretty nice. It's lighting the top of her arms. I'm going to go back to that one that we had there. That's where we had the light coming slightly from the front. Now I had this light was only 1/64th power. It was only providing just a little bit, you know, around her eyes because I wanted to maintain as much shadow as possible. So this was the one where it was from right overhead. So with that low power, you're not seeing a lot of difference in there. You want to try if we did just one light from right overhead?
Reflection there. Is that the light
Yeah.
in the glasses?
Let's take a look. There's a little, it's probably some flare. Oh, the seat. Thank you, the bike seat. Yep. Yeah, good eye on that. Right. So what we would do in that case, right, is just swing the trainer stand around and get that out of the frame. Yep. Thanks, as we see that. You want to try one from just right overhead? Let's turn off all the lights except for that circular one there, Eric. Or I can just, I can turn them off here. You can just switch them off. Maybe easier to switch them off here. No, let's leave it at 80. See what happens. Take up the power on it to 1/4 power. Okay, that's firing, and all the others are off. Okay, let's give it a try. Let's try two things. One can be just like this, kind of raking in just so that yep, like that. Good. And then we'll do one from behind her. Now it's at 1/4 power. It's probably a little high right there. I'll take it down a bit. See what happens. This could probably be a TTL thing for moving fast, but we'll see. Ooh, that's bright. We're going to take it down. Let's go down many stops.
Sunny.
Sunny. Okay. And before we even, yeah. Let me see. I'm just going to look in the back of the screen real quick. Yeah. I could probably take it down even a little bit more. I'll just take my ISO down a stop. Okay, here we go. Okay, and let's look at one coming in from the back that way. Yep, and just see what happens. So I'll show you this one just before we do it real quick. Here it comes. There. So moody, interesting light, you know. I think it could totally work for a, you know, top-level athlete that you want to look all moody and powerful, contentious. Okay. See, and then, so here it comes right from the back. And give me this here. If you do that same thing again, that's a little much, but let's just do just a little bit of fill, same deal. So angle it right where you were before. Yeah. Okay. I can get it. It's easy. It's no problem. You run that back there. I got this.
All right.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. It's maybe a slight little bit of extra there. I would probably add another light to that situation, as the reflector's only giving us so much. But you get the idea. And the reason that we're getting such darks now is that light is angled down toward the carpet, so it's absorbing. When we had these strip banks this way, they were bouncing off the walls in the background. They're adding more fill than we might have wanted, to our subject there. Okay, good. We're probably at the point where we should start to wrap things up. I'm happy to take some questions afterward for those of you who need to get off to to dinner plans and such. Please feel free to head out. Those who want to stick around for some other questions will be here for the next little while. Thanks very much for coming. Thanks, Canon, very much for having us here.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.